for joining us. My name is Melainie Rogers, and I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor. And I'm so excited to welcome you all to today's event, Body Inclusivity and Intuitive Eating in the Dietetics Profession. Today's event has been organised by the Anti-Diet Dietetic Students Organization, and I'm really very proud to be the sponsor for today's forum, which features a panel discussion with 4 very esteemed guest panelists who are all established dietitians in our field, and I would say really kind of shaking things up, pushing the edges of the envelope and helping to move our field forward. So I feel very honoured to have you all, especially because it's daylight savings and it's a Sunday morning. So this is a topic that is certainly near and dear to my heart. And it's in alignment with my goal or my mission as a dietitian in the field of eating disorders and just in the field of nutrition. So you may or may not know, but I'm a professor at the School of Nutrition at New York University. And I've been very fortunate to be able to teach a class there on eating disorders for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's been fabulous. So part of what I'm trying to do is, through teaching that one class, is to get some general knowledge around eating disorders, but also disordered eating, which, guys, whether you like it or not, as RDs to be, you are going to see this in your clientele, particularly disordered eating. But through my work over the years, I've come to learn that most schools of nutrition do not even offer a curriculum in eating disorders, and they certainly are not teaching the concepts of intuitive eating, health at every size, and other principles that have become the cornerstone to understanding and treating eating disorders, but also disordered eating, and honestly, across the board, all of our clientele. As a professional dietitian today, there is a huge gap. So I was delighted to discover that 2 students right here in New York City had founded this organization addressing precisely these issues. And so I was invited to speak at one of their meetings, and we subsequently put our heads together and decided to co-host this event. It's an incredibly important group of topics that we as RDs and RDs to be need to know about, need to get training on, so that we can go forth and use this in our work. So I'm very excited because I believe this is the first ever gathering of this kind of dietetic students from across the country in a virtual forum focusing on these issues. So we're thrilled that we received such a strong response from you all. As we said, over 800 people plus RSVP'd, which just tells us that there is just a huge need. So a little bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center, which is an outpatient treatment center here in the heart of New York City. And we offer all levels of outpatient care to all gender teens and adults. And I started Balance 12 years ago because there was such a dearth of treatment options here in New York City. Can you believe it? Nutrition counselling and guidance are a major component of our treatment programming, along with my team of therapists. We integrate a weight-inclusive philosophy that's based on the principles of intuitive eating and health at every size. And so without further ado, that's a little bit about me. I just want to say I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that you're joining us. And I would like to now turn it over to our student founders who will introduce themselves, starting with Danielle. Over to you, Danielle.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for coming today. My name is Danielle Falcheri, and I am the co-founder and president of the Anti-Diet Dietetic Students Organization, alongside my friend Rebecca Tolan. I currently am a master's student in nutrition and dietetics at NYU, and Rebecca is a DPD student at Queens College. So this past summer, I was speaking with Rebecca over the phone, and we were discussing how we both felt that our dietetics programs don't cover much information, really, if any information, about eating disorders, intuitive eating, and health at every size. We both really wanted to learn more about these topics. We've read all of the books, we've listened to the podcasts, but we wanted to learn how we can actually apply this information as a future dietitian. So I remember a few days later, Rebecca called me with this idea to start a student led discussion group where we can talk to other students about these topics that we don't get to speak about in the classroom. And long story short, that is how ADDS was born. So for those of you that don't know about ADDS, I just wanted to give a brief overview about the organization. It's a virtual discussion group and we meet bi-weekly over Zoom each week. And each meeting we have a new dietitian come to speak with us on a topic related to intuitive eating, eating disorders, diet culture, and much more. Fortunately, Melainie came and speak at our first meeting, which is how we connected with her and the Balance team to collaborate and make this event happen today. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Melainie. We are incredibly grateful for this platform you've given our group. This event would just not have been possible without you. And to everyone that's attending today, thank you so much for joining us. If you are interested in joining ADDS, there will be more information at the end of the webinar on how to join. Now I'm going to pass this over to Rebecca, the co-founder of ADDS.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. Thank you all for coming today. I wanted to first start by thanking Melainie, Leslie, and the entire team at Balance. There was so much time, effort, and really hard work that went into making this event a reality. Thank you, Melainie and Leslie, for believing in the ADDS mission from the very, very beginning. We also want to extend our gratitude to our incredible panelists, Christy, Kimmie, Brianna, and Dalina. Thank you guys so much for volunteering your time today. Everyone that's here has a lot to learn from you all. I know that Danielle and I are incredibly grateful for your work that has quite literally made waves in our field. We both talk about feeling really excited to graduate and enter this field because of the paths that you guys have created for the future of dietetics. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, thank you to everyone who's attending. We're super excited for this discussion and we hope you all enjoy. And now we're going to introduce our panelists and then we'll hand it over to our moderators. Okay, so first we have Dalina Soto. Dalina is the founder of Nutritiously Yours and Your Latina Nutritionist. She is one of the very few Spanish-speaking registered dietitians in Philadelphia, and she works with clients in person and virtually. She teaches her clients how to ditch the diet mentality and keep their culture alive. Now, Brianna Theus, she founded The Celestial Life to offer those who would traditionally shy away from treatment the opportunity to explore their relationship with food. And she offers nutrition counseling services for disordered eating, eating disorders, general wellness, and a range of medical diagnoses.
And our next panelist is Kimmie Singh, who is a fat registered dietitian based in New York City. Kimmie practices at LK Nutrition, a private practice that supports individuals with disordered eating to heal their relationship with food. Kimmie supports her clients through an anti-oppressive lens and specializes in polycystic ovarian syndrome management. She serves the Health at Every Size community through her role as treasurer for the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. And our final panelist is Christy Harrison, who is an anti-diet registered dietitian nutritionist. Christy is a certified intuitive eating counselor and author of the book Anti-Diet, Reclaim Your Time, Money, Well-Being, and Happiness Through Intuitive Eating. Christy offers online courses and private intuitive eating coaching to help people all over the world make peace with food and their bodies. Since 2013, Christy has hosted Food Psych, a weekly podcast exploring people's relationships with food, paths to body liberation. It is now one of Apple's top 100 health podcasts, reaching tens of thousands of listeners worldwide each week. And Christy is currently working on her second book called Rethinking Wellness, which will be out in 2023, so stay tuned for that. I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for coming today. I am so excited for this discussion. Now I will pass this over to Kendra and Susie, who will be moderating our event today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kendra. I'm a student at Hunter College and a dietetic intern. I'm the ADDS social media director, and I'll be moderating with Susie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susie. I'm a nutrition master's student at Teachers College, Columbia University, a marketing assistant at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center, and a member of ADDS. So we're going to get this panel started. So we're going to start with the first question. which is, can you describe what intuitive eating is for those who do not know? And Christy, would you be able to get us started with that?
Sure, happy to kick it off. So intuitive eating, I always say, is the default mode. It's the way we're born eating. You know, we're able to honor our hunger, trust our fullness, find satisfaction, not be too fussed about eating. And if we don't have anything interfering in that relationship with food, we can continue that our whole lives. And I know, because I was one of those rare people who was an intuitive eater from age, baby to age 20. And I think that has a lot to do with my privileges. I had always had access to food. I was never food insecure. And so was able to, maintain my intuitive relationship with food that way. I was always in a smaller body, so I never had to deal with weight stigma and fat phobia. And so no one interfered in my relationship with food and said, you need to eat less, you need to go on a diet. And so I was able to, maintain that intuitive relationship with food, even through some body image ups and downs through puberty and stuff like that. Was kind of able to, stay the course and stay an intuitive eater. So that's, sort of the basic level of intuitive eating, is this default connection to food. It's also, though, a philosophy and practice for getting back to that default mode, because as I said, so many people get waylaid from that intuitive relationship with food through fat phobia, through food insecurity, through various, incursions in their relationship with food. Chronic illness can be a factor as well in people developing disordered eating. And so the practice of intuitive eating that I'm certified in, that Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch developed in the 1990s, is this process for getting back to the default mode. It has 10 principles, which I won't go into here, but you can read about them online, and they're basically, they're not rules. I think that's the most important thing to know about the principles. They're not rules, they're not a recipe. They're tools and resources that help us reconnect with that default mode, with that innate relationship with food that we're all born with. And they do that by helping us strip away the diet mentality, strip away all that we've learned, all the fat phobic thinking from diet culture, help us heal our relationships with food and make peace with food, stop having good and bad foods, some foods that are deemed off limits, some foods that we feel guilty for eating. Sort of helps us heal from all of that disorder and get back in touch with our hunger and fullness cues, our ability to seek satisfaction and pleasure. And, it should also be said, intuitive eating is not the diet that says, eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, right? You're only allowed to do those things. That's not intuitive eating, that's just a diet. And there are a lot of people out there who would turn it into that sort of diet. My colleague Isabel Fox and Duke calls it the hunger and fullness diet, right? So there's a lot of people who want to make intuitive eating out to be the hunger and fullness diet, and it is definitely not that. The first principle of intuitive eating is reject the diet mentality. So right away, we know it's not a diet, right? So, it's about, yes, getting back in touch with your body's cues, but that can be really tricky, especially for people who have significantly disordered eating, for people who've been chronically dieting for a long time, for people with chronic illness or medications that might interfere with their ability to perceive hunger and fullness cues, for people with food insecurity, who have a limited ability to honor their hunger, right? So there's all these things that can sort of make it trickier to get back in touch with those cues. And so, I really like to emphasize that those hunger and fullness cues are not the be all and end all of intuitive eating. They're 2 of the 10 principles. Yes, they're helpful. Yes, it's certainly, important to make sure you're eating enough and, getting food when you're hungry, and knowing whether or not you're hungry, and how, telling when you're full and being able to stop when you're full. Those are kind of advanced intuitive eating skills. And so, it's important to go through, kind of have support with all of that and support with all the principles, so that you're not just fixating on hunger and fullness and turning it into yet another diet.
Christy, may I say, as one of the moderators today, that is one of the best summaries I've heard of intuitive eating ever.
Oh, thank you.
I just thank you for that. And I also wanted to thank you for the way that you were able to frame, your own experience, as you are one of the maybe few rare people that from birth to 20 you were able to eat intuitively, because you didn't experience food insecurity, and because you grew up in a body that, you know, is not fat shamed, etc. Key components to all the different factors that can influence why people may or may not have been able to continue a journey with intuitive eating. That was phenomenal. I wonder if our other panelists might have some comments there.
I have a question. So if someone is like brand new to this concept, what would you recommend for getting started with intuitive eating?
I don't want to take too much of people's time. If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. Anyone? Okay, I'll take it. So I would say that, you know, for getting started with intuitive eating, I think the biggest, you know, the two foundational principles, or, you know, the first two principles are reject the diet mentality and honor your hunger. And I think those are two that, you know, people sort of any point of their intuitive eating practice can start to focus on, you know. And again, making honor your hunger is not a rule, right? It's not that you have to only eat when you're hungry, or that, you know, if you're food insecure, that you're doing it wrong if you're not able to honor your hunger. No, it's not about that. But it's about, you know, trying to do your best to get your food needs met in whatever way that looks like for you, in whatever way is possible, given your circumstances at the time. And so even if you're someone with you know, chronic eating disorder, with a clinical eating disorder, you know, and we see with people with anorexia nervosa that oftentimes their hunger and fullness cues get kind of wonky because of the biology of the disease. And so you can't expect yourself to eat only according to hunger and fullness cues when you're in an early, you know, the early stages of recovery from an eating disorder or in an active eating disorder, because oftentimes that can lead you to restrict. So, you know, we don't want to encourage people who have active eating disorders to only eat according to hunger and fullness, certainly not really encourage anyone to do that, right? Because there's lots of reasons we need to eat in addition to hunger. And, you know, I think even people with active eating disorders or in early stages of recovery can start to notice subtle hunger cues. And those can look like, you know, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, anxiety, thoughts of food, intrusive thoughts of food, losing focus, you know, all of these things that have nothing to do with actually the physical feeling of hunger in the stomach, but are more, you know, I call them non-stomach signs of hunger, right? Signs that your body needs food, your body needs energy. And so I think, you know, we can help people focus on those things. We can help people focus on unlearning diet culture's rules, recognizing how those are showing up, recognizing the disordered thoughts and behaviors that are interfering with them having a peaceful relationship with food. And so I think those are kind of the two key principles that I would start with. And I think that's true for dietitians and dietitians to be as well, who want to teach this stuff, right? Because, you know, there's that saying, you can only take people as far as you've gone yourself, right? And so I noticed in some of the questions that are coming up later that there's, or some of maybe the questions that we'll get to if we have time, at the end, there's definitely some hesitation around intuitive eating, this desire, like, how can we, you know, make sure people are eating healthy while they're practicing intuitive eating? And, you know, I'm seeing in some of those questions, maybe, you know, just sort of a place to go for yourself, right? Like, can you dig into those questions for yourself and your own relationship with food? You know, why is it so important to me that people, quote unquote, eat healthy? What does it mean if someone kind of puts those goals to the side and focuses on healing their relationship with food first, you know, and maybe how their eating on a day-to-day basis looks different? And so what's coming up for me in that? Like, what's my reaction to that? Why am I having this reaction? Where is the diet mentality showing up in that? And how can I, you know, untangle that for myself? How can I reject the diet mentality in my own life?
Christy, that's awesome. I have a question, if I may, for Kimmie, actually, around this topic, because Kimmie, you specialize in PCOS, and PCOS can so mess with appetite, cues, etc. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were with relation to perhaps the initial question anyway.
Yeah, I think it sort of hits on like, how do we manage any sort of condition while still holding space for intuitive eating? And there's this really common tendency for people to first over-attribute the power of food in managing a condition, and really sort of under-attribute or underrate like how much the relationship with food is even affecting that condition. So sometimes it's less about the actual food and more about how your eating behaviors are coming up. And so for that reason, especially with PCOS, I find it so important to work from a place of consistency. How can we make sure someone's relationship with food is really solid and getting enough food in before working towards, okay, what foods might make you feel better or what foods might help with your PCOS symptoms. And I think especially for students, I like to look at Ellen Satter's hierarchy of food needs, and that like if we go up to those instrumental foods without having a really great foundation of like having enough food, having enough tasty food, it's going to be a bit wobbly and not so consistent.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Kimmie. And Brianna, you treat disordered eating, eating disorders, and other medical diagnoses. I wonder what your comments are around this, because as Kimmie said, it gets complicated with medical conditions, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think with, excuse me, with a lot of medical conditions, the first thing that a doctor may tell you is that you need to lose weight, right? If you have diabetes, the first thing is weight loss. If you have some type of heart condition, the first thing is weight loss. And I think one, that's dangerous, and two, it's not true.
Right.
You can manage different illnesses without going to the first step of trying to lose weight. So I think that is where intuitive eating comes in. Being able to kind of listen to your body, being able to honor your hunger, being able to use a principle of gentle nutrition.
Yeah.
While managing your illness. So if someone has diabetes, we're not going to say, okay, just ignore all your numbers of the glucose. Don't like, we're not saying to ignore everything.
Right.
We're saying that you can still manage it without the first step being weight loss.
Absolutely, Brianna. You know, we hear so much from our clients. They had an earache, they go to the doctor for an earache and they're told lose weight. You know, we know it's rampant. But, you know, yourself and Kimmie and Christy are all reflecting the idea of consistent nutrition. Kimmie was your word. Consistent eating consistently, evenly throughout the day has an enormous impact on ghrelin, leptin, and our appetite hormones, also the insulin response and blood sugars. And so that can have an incredible impact on the medical biomarkers in and of itself, right? Without necessarily necessitating weight loss, which takes us down a rabbit hole. Dalina, I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping in here, but I'm so curious about your replies here. Dalina, you are one of the very few bilingual Spanish and English speaking RDs out there. I just want to like hug you. It's so awesome to have a bilingual RDs out there because it's so needed. I'm wondering what you're seeing with your clientele, particularly your Spanish-speaking clientele. I mean, how is this concept? Is this concept even something you see within your clients, or what are you seeing?
I think that the concept of intuitive eating is something that's known in our culture. I think that it's something that I don't call it intuitive eating for them. I just don't know a really good translation in Spanish to be able to say it. To me, it's just helping them do what they can with what they have. I work in Philadelphia in a lower income community where people sometimes don't even have access to food. So my job isn't to shame them or guilt them into buying foods that they might not be able to afford or can't even cook because they don't have access to an oven or don't have access to microwaves or just don't have access to a kitchen in general. My job as a dietitian is to help them, like I said, do what they can with what they have and be intuitive in being able to connect, reduce stress, sleep. There's so many other things that we can do to help manage a lot of the chronic issues that they have that don't necessarily focus on the food itself, because the food is the least of their worries half of the time. So I think for me, my approach is how can we look at this from a holistic view? Can you, tell me what you do have access to, and let's help you have a better relationship with that, not feel guilt or shame, and help you do what you can while also helping you manage whatever chronic issue that you have.
Oh, I love it, Dalina. And I put your quote in there in the chat box, actually, do what they can with what they have. And also you use the word holistic approach. And for our RDs to be, These are not necessarily concepts that you may be getting in your education, but so essential once you get out there and start working with clients. You realize that this is the reality, and we have an obligation, I feel, to meet our clients where they are. And as you said, keywords there were not to shame our clients or make them feel guilty. And certainly not to be punitive in our approach as well. Dalina, thanks so much for that. I'm going to send it back to our moderators, Susie and Kendra, for our next question, guys.
Yeah, Dalina actually beautifully introduced our next topic,
Right.
which is if you're living with food insecurity or low socioeconomic status, what can you do to start approaching intuitive eating? Maybe Kimmie can start us off with that.
I would love to, yeah, gosh, it's a tough one because I think in an ideal world, I would love to be able to say, yeah, it's totally possible we can get there. And realistically, it's really not going to be possible as it is for somebody with financial privilege. And so I think it's important to focus on equity, focus on meeting people where they really are. And so as a lot of people are really familiar with this kind of like restrict binge cycle, I see this common issue for folks that don't have consistent access to financial means to buy food, and that like there's sort of like a feast and famine cycle from when they get funds and when they don't have funds. So if they're waiting for a paycheck, if they're waiting for SNAP benefits, there's this period of time where they really don't have enough money to eat consistently. And then when they get that money, it's sort of like they're eating past fullness more, they're feeling less connected to their fullness cues, and they're oftentimes feeling like it's not even that they're really enjoying food, it's just in response to not having enough food. And so what I oftentimes try to do is find a way for them to maximize their resources so they can have consistent food throughout the month. Because if we can intervene there, it can be a great stepping stone, just so they're not going through those waves of restricting and then binging.
I agree with you, Kimmie. I think the first thing that is really important to know about intuitive eating is that it is a privilege, right? Not everybody has access to food all of the time. So helping people get the assistance they need, and also listening to your clients. If they're telling you, I don't have access to this, I don't have access to a kitchen, I don't have access to grocery stores, you're not going to tell them, okay, you need to go get quinoa, you need to go get avocados, you need to go get all these different foods and eat when you're hungry, right? Because that's not a possibility for them. So really the important thing is to be able to listen to your client and recognize that intuitive eating is a privilege, and there are some things that you can work on them with. So some things like rejecting the diet mentality, you can work on them with that concept, but not all of the concepts of intuitive eating are going to be accessible for some people.
Yes, and I think that most importantly, again, I often go back to the guilt and shame. Some people don't have access to supermarkets and they do have access to fast food. And if they can feed their family with $20 from a fast food place and can't afford to maybe go to a supermarket and buy, fresh fruits and vegetables, that is not their fault. And your job is not to guilt them into saying, well, it's bad to eat French fries, or it's bad to do this for your cholesterol, and all of these things that we're taught in school. That's not the place where they are. They don't have that privilege to be able to manage that at that moment. So what I often do is ask them, where are you eating? How can we incorporate different foods? How can we try different things on the menu? Bring your menus to me. Let's look at them. Let's see how we can add variety. If this is the only way that you can eat and feed your family, let's do this in a way that's going to help you feel less guilt and shame around it, because that makes all the difference in how they're feeling. And we know just how cortisol and stress and all of this affects their health. So if we could even reduce that, we're helping them in the long run. And how Kimmie says, it's a lot of planning and management sometimes involved in, like, okay, so this is your food budget. How can we do this? How can we help you stretch that? And something that I heard, and gosh, I don't remember who said it. It was in a clubhouse call that I heard what someone said, you know, people don't really want to go to food banks. You know, they don't want free food. They want to be able to afford food. And I see that all of the time. No one wants to be that person walking into a food bank and getting free food. What they want really is to be able to afford that. So how can we help them do that? That is my job. Really, that's the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm not going to be, you know, worrying about their cholesterol if they don't even have access to food.
Yeah. Dalina, so true, right? Really back to the basics there with the work that you're doing. Absolutely back to the basics. Thank you so much for that. Guys, there's a couple of questions that came up, and I wonder if any of our panelists might take this one. The question is from Francesca Castro. How do you approach someone's excitement about losing weight that might happen naturally when following intuitive eating? I'm not sure if any of you have encountered that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that's honestly one of the trickiest places to be in intuitive eating, because I think there's so many compliments that people get for losing weight in this society, and compliments can be so toxic. Sometimes compliments can be part of what drove drove someone into really disordered eating in the first place, because they lost weight with their first diet, they got a million compliments, they were reinforced socially for it, and it, you know, kicked off the cycle of disordered eating. So I think just sort of preparing them for that, you know, and talking through, like, what is it about this experience of weight loss that feels good to you? Like, what do you feel like you're gaining from this that, you know, isn't necessarily attributable to the weight loss itself, right? But more to the weight stigma that our society has, and sort of the way it frames weight loss as good. And, you know, the what do the compliments mean to you, right? What is this giving you that you're getting all these compliments, or the social reinforcement? It's, you know, people want acceptance, people want love, people want, you know, success and ability to feed their families. And, you know, all of those things are really, to me, fundamental human needs and things we all deserve, regardless of body size, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, or, you know, anything else, right? So kind of stripping it down to those basic fundamental human needs, like what's really underneath this desire for weight loss, or what's really underneath this celebration of weight loss, and how can you try to bring that into your life? How can you try to get those needs met in a way that has nothing to do with the size and shape of your body or how you eat?
Absolutely. And because we're so inundated in this society about what we should look like, and it's you know, we're all brainwashed in that. It's absolutely to be expected that our clients are going to be excited, I think, right? Even if they understand health at every size, and they're trying to process and internalize this new messaging, because that's really what it is. For all of our lives, guys, we've internalized this other message, which is, you know, it's you know, your value, unfortunately, particularly as a woman, is kind of what you look like and what you weigh. And we've totally drunk the Kool-Aid. And so hopefully today we're trying to shake that up. Kendra and Susie as our moderators, I'm just wondering about how we are with time with our questions on intuitive eating. I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, so these were all really, really amazing things that have been said, and it's actually a really perfect intro into our next topic, which is health at every size. And the question that I'm going to pose to the panelists is, can you briefly explain what health at every size / body inclusivity, what that is? Would anyone like to take this first question?
So I can,
Brianna.
I'll very briefly explain health at every size. Health at every size is basically what it says it is. You can be healthy at any size that you are, and that's not to say that everybody is healthy at their size. So basically it's saying if you are thin, that doesn't mean that you are healthy. If you are fat, that doesn't mean that you are unhealthy. There is such a thing as body diversity. It is accepting that there is body diversity in the world, and that you don't have to lose weight to be healthy.
Excellent summary, Brianna. I hope we recorded that, so I'm going to write that down. That was really, really great, because don't you guys find that for people who are very new to the concept, when they hear health at every size, there's usually a very, very strong reaction of, Oh no, that's not accurate, right? So you hit it on the head, Brianna. Yeah. Back over to our questions, guys.
All right, so the health at every size movement is commonly paired with social and racial justice issues. Can you explain why that might be the case? Maybe Dalina can start us off with that question.
Yes, so the health at every size movement is like Brianna said, just a movement to be inclusive of all sizes. And the movement for socio, just now I'm drawing a blank, of course, because I'm put on the spot, but the goal is to understand that really the fat movement was created by women of color, Black women, who really started this movement into saying like, hey, we can be healthy at any size, we can come in all sizes. And then also it's understanding that there is a hierarchy in wellness that I think trickles down into the nutrition world, where there is a hierarchy of foods that are considered good, and then there's foods that are considered bad. And it all trickles down to a lot of cultural foods, a lot of foods that are not quote unquote in the American diet, that are considered to be, bad, or if you eat them in a certain way, they're not going to be good. And so I think it's all the social justice movement is understanding that, there is diversity, that there is people from all different types of countries and have access to all different types of food, and that there isn't this one way of eating that's going to provide health for everyone. And I think that that's where that piece comes into play. But really, in essence, the fat movement was created or was started by women of color. And I think that we need to be able to notice that and understand that we need to give credit to that.
I would love to add that when I first learned about health at every size, I learned that it's inherently anti-racist. And I pretty recently learned that that's not the case. It wasn't like fat women of color kind of really were the foundation of like the fat positive movement. But health at every size was actually started by mostly white people, and that it was, I think, just in 2015, Jessica Wilson, a Black dietitian, was really involved in naming, we need to add another principle, we need to talk more about respectful care. And so I know I'm involved in ASDA, the Association for Size Diversity and Health, and we've been doing a lot of great work to try to change it. And I just like to name that because I think we're all trying to do better, and we can't really try to move forward unless we name where we messed up in the past.
Absolutely, Kimmie. Thank you for saying that, because I think what can happen as we're moving into more understanding and more awareness is, look, we all come from a place of ignorance. And I use that word in not a judgmental way, but maybe just a factual way, because we can't know everything straight out of the gate, right? It's a learning curve. It's like why we're doing this today is because most of our RD interns don't know about this. And the reason is because they haven't been taught it yet, right? And that's what we're trying to change here. And I think you're right, Kimmie, that I think we, we're all trying to do better. We're all trying to increase our awareness and our understanding, because I truly think that most of us are coming from this from a place of good intention, but I'll put that in inverted commas because we also know that we also all have our own bias, internalized bias, unconscious bias, fat phobia bias because of the society we live in, the racial piece, et cetera, and honestly, as a clinician in this field, I wonder if you guys are feeling the same. You have to, as you said, Christy, earlier, you have to do your own work and you have to shed a light on your own biases. And it can be a little bit painful and embarrassing, but you have to do that in order to continue to learn to be able to walk the talk with what we're trying to do here with inclusivity across, all realms. Well said, Kimmie. Thanks for that. And owning it. You've just got to own it, and just continue to try to learn and do better. Thank you for saying that. Would anyone else like to comment on that?
All right, so we can get going with the next question. How can we, as future dietitians, hold space for our patients' weight loss journeys while offering a non-diet approach? Would Christy like to answer that?
Sure, yes. So I'm having a little bit of a reaction to the term weight loss journeys, and I just want to name that because that term, and not to shame anyone or make someone feel bad for using that term, because I think that's the term that we all use in diet culture. And I didn't really finish my story, but when I was 20, I tumbled into disordered eating. I was very disordered with food for a good 8 to 10 years after that. And only in the last 10 years or so, I'm almost 40 now, I've finally kind of got my stuff together in the last 10 years, right? But when I was first a dietitian and starting my career as a journalist, and well into my career as a journalist, was very caught up in diet culture too. So just to own that I've come from a place of fat phobia, just like everyone else, right? That we are all born into diet culture and we all have our journeys out of it. But this term weight loss journey, I think, is used in diet culture as a positive thing, right? It's used to say, we're on this journey to self-improvement. This is a journey of betterment, right? And I think we need to really question that. I think we need to really push back against that, in maybe gentle ways, depending on where our clients are at. But I think, of course, it's natural for people to feel excited and proud and like they're doing something good for themselves if they're losing weight, or they want to lose weight because they think that it's going to give them all these deeper things. And so kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think getting at what those deeper things that someone is looking for out of weight loss are, and, depending on how ready the person is to kind of hear this, is interjecting some of the science along the way of like, weight loss actually isn't sustainable for the vast majority of people, and weight cycling carries its own major health risks. Weight stigma is also a huge health risk, both to mental and physical health for both of these things. And so, how can we as providers really do no harm by not encouraging weight loss, by not encouraging people to do these things that are going to, put them into a disordered relationship with food, that are going to put them into weight cycling, and then are going to reinforce weight stigma? Because we really see from the literature that even the most subtle comments from doctors, even really subtle denigrations of body size in the form of like innuendo, you don't even have to say it, and the evidence really shows that people still pick up on it and they feel stigmatized. And weight stigma has all these health risks that it carries, right? So as providers, we're our mission is to do no harm. And so how can we really dig into our own biases, our own weight stigma, and the stuff that we've learned that maybe isn't so helpful, that is weight stigmatizing, or that pushes people towards disordered eating and weight cycling, so that we can kind of hold the line with our clients and our patients, right, in the most compassionate way possible, in a way that is non-shaming, that is understanding, and that of course they're going to feel this way. And I can't in good conscience as a provider co-sign the desire for weight loss, or the pursuit of, I mean, of course I can understand the desire for weight loss, but I can't co-sign the pursuit of weight loss. And I can't, prescribe that to you, because I know from my own research, and perhaps, for some folks, my own lived experience, that this just is gonna, it's a recipe for disaster, really, disorder.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well done, Christy. I'm wondering if the other panelists would like to comment on if a client does have this idea, which of course most of our clients are going to cut, not of course, but anecdotally from what we've seen with 20 years myself working with clients, they're coming in as part of the diet culture because they think that that's healthy, as you said, Christy. They come to a nutritionist because they think that we're the person to see around this weight loss journey. Again, because they're trying to, feel that that is what they're going to do to make themselves a healthier version of themselves. And we're all in support of that, right? It's just that the vehicle is wrong. So I'm wondering if our other panelists have comments on how do you handle that conversation when your clients come in with that goal?
Go ahead, Kimmie.
Dalina, do you want to take a shot, and Brianna?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I usually hold space for that want to be on that journey, and I usually ask, well, what does that journey look like for you, right? If you didn't just put a number on it, right? What are you trying to achieve? And usually I hear, I want to be able to run with my kids, or I want to be able to walk up the steps and feel a certain way, or I want to, you know, have more energy. There's so many ways that people describe it that don't have anything to do with the number on the scale. And so I say, well, that's what we're going to work on, right? Like those are your goals. Those are the things that you want to focus on. And you're not describing a number, you're describing feelings and things that you want to do. So those are the things that we're going to be working towards, and whatever happens to that number happens, but that doesn't mean that you didn't do something to feel better and to work on your health journey, right? And so we also hold space for what happens if that number doesn't change. Are you really going to stop doing those healthy behaviors? Or are you, you know, like, what is it that you're really trying to achieve here? And so it's holding space for all of that, because who of us doesn't want or hasn't felt that way before, right? I think that we have all been there and have all felt like, you know, we needed to change ourselves in order to fit in. And so it's really holding that space and finding other ways to make yourself feel better that don't involve that.
Absolutely, Dalina. Brianna.
Yeah, I was going to say everything that Dalina and Christy already said, really just validating them, validating the fact that they do want to lose the weight, because it's so normal in the society, because that's what's promoted everywhere, right? It's all over the media, it's all over social media, it's in movies, that you have to be thin in order to be attractive or in order to be successful. So really validating them that they do want to lose weight before you get to the piece of, okay, this is why maybe weight loss isn't the best, or this is why weight loss doesn't work, going on this like strict diet. Because if you go right into it as, okay, you want to lose weight, that is wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, then they're just going to leave and go to someone else who is going to help them lose the weight.
That's right.
Yeah, so really validating them.
Absolutely, Brianna. And actually, one of my favorite things that I say to them is around that, you know, the whole validation. Absolutely, I totally get that. I totally get that. And then you gently weave in, you know, the kind of, you know, biological weight. Where does your body want to naturally hang at, given where it is right now from the body composition? I tend to like, I like the science stuff, so I tend to, you know, educate from that perspective, right or wrong. You know, where are we with our age, our hormones, you know, underlying medical conditions, history of weight cycling. So where does your body naturally want to hang out at? And that's what I can help you with. And that's through getting the food, kind of consistent food intake, you know, and the principles of intuitive eating. And one thing I do like, and they'll say, yeah, I get it, totally get it. And I still want to lose weight. And so we talk about the idea that, you know, 95% of diets fail, meaning that most people, if they try to lose weight, they can lose weight. But if you follow up 2 to 5 years later, 95% of people we know from studies have regained that weight, plus some, usually. And you do that over and over. We call that weight cycling, and we now know how detrimental that can be to the body composition, to our mental health, and our overall health in general. And so I say to my clients, you know, if you went to the doctor and the doctor said, okay, I hear your ailment, here's a medication, 95% of the time it won't work, and in fact it will make things worse. But you know, 5% of the time it does. And so I just ask people, would you take that medication? And I'd be like, don't you have something else, doc? I mean, come on, that's a really bad statistic. You're going to be kidding me, right? So using a little bit of humor in there as well, to just, you know, point the reality that if we go down that road, we're actually ultimately going to make it worse for you and take you further away from your health goals of being, you know, the healthiest version of yourself mentally and physically, whatever that means to you. So, you know, that's just a statistic I like to use. Any other questions on that one, guys? And we do have a question that came in from one of our participants today around this topic, which is, and it's a really good one, when you're working with a team of various professionals, how do you coordinate care and advocate for the client when a lot of other health professionals do not have the awareness of body positivity and health at every size? That is an exceptionally good question because we run up against it all the time. Would anyone like to take a shot at this? Kimmie, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just kind of making sure I touch base with all of our panelists.
Oh yeah, put me on the spot. I love it. So yeah, I find that depending on the provider, some really appreciate the education and learning more. Some really are stuck in their own philosophies. And it's up for the client to decide if it's a provider they want to switch off or if there is really another option. I like to try to find the common ground. So although a provider might feel like they wish the client would pursue intentional weight loss and might not understand why that's not a good goal, we sometimes can find the common goal of like engaging in less eating disorder behaviors or like feeling like they're maybe eating past fullness less often. And so I like to find that common ground and work from there.
Absolutely. Love it. Great. Back to you, Kendra and Susie.
Oh, that's such a great answer, Kimmie. I'm just thinking about how you can focus on, improving the lipid panels or something else like that. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit to the dietetics profession. So the first question is, how do you think the stereotype of being thin in the dietetic profession impacts dietitians who may not reflect the thin ideal?
Can I answer this one too? Well, it's tough because I feel like it really affects everyone so much. But I know for so many folks that I speak with, when they don't see other providers that look like them or they don't see themselves represented, they start to question their own credibility and knowledge and if they really belong without knowing that they have so much more knowledge from their own lived experience that others can't always provide. So if you're watching this and that's you're not alone. Yeah, and I think even for those that are thin, I think it also affects them and feeling like they need to look a certain way or perform, or it doesn't really allow anybody to show up in their most authentic way when they feel that pressure.
Kimmie, that's so true, because how many of us, once people find out we're a nutritionist, start to examine what we're eating? Have you had that phenomenon? I think we all have, so much so that pre-COVID, when we used to go out in real life and meet people at parties, I got to the point where I didn't tell people I was a nutritionist anymore because I just couldn't handle all the questions and the expectations and, oh, well, you must eat like this and you must do this and you must do that, right? So you're right, there is a real pressure there. And I think you also beautifully touched upon the fact that we have a real dearth of diversity in our field, in our profession. From size diversity to racial diversity to gender diversity. It's something that, therefore, as you said, Kimmie, if you don't see other people in your field who look like you, it's hard to feel validated, imposter syndrome and such. And I think that that's a really important piece for our field, is to work hard to bring more diversity so that we can have a better representation of our society within our profession. So what that means is that clients can therefore feel more comfortable reaching out for help if they're talking to a provider that maybe looks like them or they can relate to or whatever. It's a very powerful thing from that perspective as well. Love that. Other comments on that, guys?
I just had another comment to add. I mean, I think in general, the thin ideal in our profession makes this field feel unsafe for people who are larger bodied. That's what I've heard from the few larger bodied dietitians or dietitians to be that I've known, is that, there's a sense of, it's not a welcoming space, right? And I think part of that has to do with the curriculum, and I know in some of the questions that we got in beforehand, there were a few questions about the curriculum and sort of how do we bring health at every size into the curriculum. And I just wanted to point out a study, and I didn't write down the name of the study, but there's a study that just came out recently that I can send around after this, that looked at sort of knowledge and incorporation of health at every size curricula in dietetic internships and in coordinated programs, DPD programs. And it's kind of a cool study because it got a lot of, like 40% of the programs responded. It was mostly undergraduate programs, but there are definitely some DI programs as well. And it found that overall, 95% of program directors were aware of non-diet weight neutral approaches, including health at every size. A smaller number had incorporated them into their curriculum, so only 72% had incorporated them. And of those, it was only like one class usually, or one lecture, not even a whole class, right? But among those that had not incorporated it yet, 74% of program directors said they were interested in incorporating this approach into their curriculum. And the ones that only had one class or something like that said that they, didn't have enough time in the curriculum, that the accreditation council didn't require it. And so they weren't, they were sort of bringing it in as an elective or just a one-off class. But if the accreditation council did include health at every size in the curriculum, that they would, of course, incorporate it. And so I think that just shows a lot of opportunity to, for you all to push for incorporating, non-diet weight neutral approaches into your programs, that there's a huge interest in it among the programs that don't have anything yet. And there is, there are a fair amount of programs that actually have at least one class or, one lecture incorporated. And so there's possibly opportunity to expand to more, which that was really heartening to me, because I did my degree 10 years ago. And at that time, there was nothing, there was, I wasn't seeing, and most of the people that went through programs at that same time, nobody saw health at every size in their programs. But, today it's, I think, kind of a different ballgame, and there's ways, there's opportunities, I think, for you all to sort of push your program directors, maybe those who are open, because of course there's that 30% or whatever that is not open to it. And in the survey, they said, I don't believe in this approach. I don't think this is relevant or valid or whatever. So those are the folks that maybe we don't want to bother with, because there's this huge percentage that is open, that's sort of willing to listen and willing to potentially incorporate this information. And so I think that, that could go a long way to making the field feel a little safer and a little more welcoming to people who are not meeting this thin ideal.
Absolutely. Christy, I love that. It's really a call to arms today, in the sense of, really wanting to empower all the students, the RD students who are on this call. And I think that certainly was my motivation for wanting to put this together today with ADDS and help raise their voice, help certainly elevate their voice, and also to have our wonderful panelists on the panel today, because I think we all feel the same. We haven't had training in this. We know the reality is that some of what our training is outdated, and there's room and a need, shall we just say, there's a need, because we're doing harm. We are unintentionally doing harm by putting people on diets, which is our training, guys. And again, I teach at NYU, and I've been working there with the wonderful new dietetic intern director. She's really trying to shake things up and incorporate some more of the health at every size, the intuitive eating, the anti-diet piece, because that is the future of our field in a lot of ways. And I've learned from the work I've been doing with NYU over the last year or so a little bit more about how much of our dietetic internship training in the curriculum is set and how much flexibility is there. And I was very surprised to learn that there is actually quite a bit of flexibility on behalf of the actual universities themselves in what they put into their curriculum. And I also think that what we need to do, guys, is we need to go to the academy, and we need to, and our, certification through CDR. We need to go back to the academy and say, hey guys, we need this. We need this. And to take this research, the research article you mentioned, Christy, and also the research around health at every size and intuitive eating, etc., and the research that diets don't work. Now, that's going to cause a major kerfuffle, because our association, the Academy of Dietetics and Nutrition is based on this foundation of MNT and weight management, and it got conflated. I say conflated, guys, because it's not cause and effect, but we were trained that, if you increase weight, your body weight, then it will cause diabetes and all these other illnesses. Therefore, weight gain is a bad thing, right? That was the message that we got, and I think we still get. But in fact, it isn't cause and effect, and there's a whole lot of things, and I know I'm treading on pretty delicate thin ice here with how I'm phrasing that. But I want to kind of meet the students where they are with what you've been taught. with the fact that this is actually not accurate to the degree that we thought it was. Can I just be diplomatic there? And that we need to go back to the academy and ask for a change. And one thing I would like to suggest, and I wonder if Brianna and Dalina and Kimmie and Christy agree with me, maybe it's time to cleave off the nutrition studies from the food service piece, maybe, and make all that room for health at every size and size diversity and body positivity and intuitive eating. Because I don't know about you guys, but 20 years ago and to this day, we still need to know what size can you need in the food service cycle. Dalina's laughing, right? And how wide the aisle has to be in the kitchen between the benches. And I'm like, I will never use this information. And it's still on the exam today. So there is so much room for us to make room for this. And with social media and with you guys coming together en masse as you have today, you guys meaning all of the wonderful RD students out there, nutrition students, really guys, we don't, you know, we can just go with this research and say, hey, we want to update the curriculum. We need to update the curriculum for the sake of our field, you know, and for our legitimacy as RDs who are doing no harm in following the research. So other thoughts from Dalina and Brianna and Kimmie on that? Obviously, we're pretty passionate about this, right? Dalina, take it away.
I agree with it all. I think there needs to be, you know, more to be done in our profession. I think there needs to be access for more diversity. I think that one of the biggest issues I came across to become a dietitian, and also what I hear a lot of the students that I talk to is, you know, the unpaid dietetic internship. I just saw this morning someone posted about how, you know, a director said, you know, if she finds out if someone has a part-time job or something like that, it would be frowned upon. That was something that I heard when I was in my dietetic internship. And so we have to make it accessible for people of all, you know, backgrounds to be able to join the dietetic field. I think that right now, as it stands and as it was 10 years ago when I started my career, it was really hard. And so we need to kind of like flip it around, start over maybe, I don't know. We need to have it become more accessible to people of color and people of different cultures and genders, and make it inclusive, because as it stands right now, it really isn't. And so I don't think we're going to be able to make strides in our profession and being able to help until the field of dietetics looks like what the United States looks like and like the world looks like.
Exactly, Dalina, exactly. My quick question, because you guys are really well connected and resourced, is there anyone out there doing scholarships? Because yes, first and foremost, we should be paid for our internship. I mean, you know, I can't remember how many of us had so much anxiety about, especially if, well, I was in New York, so it was like, how the heck am I going to pay rent and not get paid for 6 months, especially if, not even especially, but some of us don't have any kind of family support. Some of us had to work our way through. And some of us, myself included, left a career to then join this. So there was no income coming in. You know, it's really scary, and it really makes the difference between people going through the RD or not. Are there, okay, what have we got here? Am I promising this? I'm going to keep it. So Emma says, I'm a DPD director, and we spend a lot of time on weight inclusivity in your MNT class. That's great. I'm going to read the rest of that, but I want to go back to this point of, does anyone know if anyone is developing scholarships to help RD interns through their internships to help meet this problem, Dalina, that you highlighted? Kimmie.
I think Dalina just said it in the chat, but Diversify Dietetics, they have a grant. It's the due date for the grant is actually coming up. I think it's like $10,000. It's coming up in April. They're going to have three people to receive it. So that might be
only three.
Only three, unfortunately. Of the grant I have in mind, but they might have some other options too.
I wonder collectively, guys, like, you know, between all of our participants today and us panelists and who we know, if we could really, you know, it wouldn't take a lot for, if we had a lot of people who who pooled in to try to help to get many more scholarships out there. A&D has many scholarships. Sarah Jennings is saying, what kind of scholarships, Sarah, and how many are there? Because it's not helpful to just get $1,000. I mean, that's helpful, but it's not really helpful. It's not realistic, right? And I've met some RD interns, a wonderful RD intern, her name is Cara, who's at NYU, who's a mum. So she's trying to support her family as well as go through this. I like to come up with ideas and get people together and make things happen. So I'd love to kind of somehow get some serious scholarship money coming up until we can solve the problem at the core, which is we need to be paid. Go ahead. Yes, Christy.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I have one thought, not a scholarship, but there's something called prior assessed learning that was hugely helpful for me in my internship because I was a returning student. I had all these years of experience as a journalist, but then I also worked in public health settings, sort of, as a nutritionist before I was licensed as an RD. And I did my dietetic internship at CUNY through Dr. Ann Gaba, who's fabulous. I know Kimmie worked with her as well. She's now at the CUNY School of Public Health. And they're amazing at offering prior assessed learning. And what that basically is that you get credit for internship hours for work that you've done that's related to nutrition. And it can be very far afield from what you might think. So like my food service, for example, counted as editing a cookbook. I was an editor on this huge cookbook series, and that counted for all of my food service. I worked at the City Department of Health and Nutrition Policy. That counted for all of my community, and it was paid, those were paid jobs, right? And so I think that's a huge thing too, is that if you can find jobs that are nutrition related and something that could potentially be prior assessed learning, maybe talk to the internship director before you start there. I know other schools have prior assessed learning too. I think they're just, it might be different for different programs, how willing they are to be flexible and to work with you on that. So I think that's, if you're going into a DPD and you're interviewing, that's a question you can ask them. It's like, how much prior assessed learning do you give? How open are you to accepting it? But that was huge for me. And I had so much school debt already from going back to school and, only being able to work part-time or being in school full-time and kind of having, in my late 20s, early 30s in New York, it's expensive. And so it really helped to not take on a lot more debt during my internship program.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Thank you. And Leslie's just put that in the chat box as well. That is wonderful to know. I think we need to, and Sarah Jennings has said that, the A&D has scholarships from anywhere from $500 to $1,000 each. Each year it's determined by fundraising efforts and investment returns on scholarship funds. That's awesome. Maybe we should get into that, guys, set up some kind of investment fund for RD interns. Let's do it. Someone with a finance background, contact me later and we'll set this up and take advantage of the stock market and maybe one of these investment apps that are now out there. We can do it, girls. We can do it. Girls, sorry, that sounded not the way I wanted it to say. That's my Australianism coming out there. Great. Anyone else want to speak to this pretty important topic about, as you were saying, access to be able to go through the internship? There's a real barrier, and that is a legitimate financial barrier, and also the fact that if you're sitting in a classroom, and again, I love NYU, I graduated from NYU, I've lectured at a number of other universities, and it is still very much lacking in diversity. If you don't see people that look like you in a certain field, you're less inclined to feel safe and welcome, and that this could be a place that you could work in. So it's an important one begets the other position. Brianna, what was your experience around the RD internship and such, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I was actually really privileged. So I graduated a semester early. So from December until August, I was working a couple of jobs full time to be able to pay for the internship. So that was a really great experience for me. And I know that that's not the experience for a lot of people. But I think what everyone was saying, we need more BIPOC dietitians, not only for other dietitians coming into it, or RD to Bs coming into it to be able to see them, but also for the clients that we that we counsel. If they are going to a white dietitian who doesn't understand what they eat, who doesn't understand their culture, who doesn't understand their upbringing, then that is going to lead to a lot of it could damage it, or it could damage them. So I think having more BIPOC dietitians, and then also I feel like we need to go into schools that are even like high schools, elementary schools, because a lot of people don't even know what dietitians are.
Yeah.
So before we even get to that point of getting to the internship and helping people to pay for the internship, we need to actually open up the conversation about dietitians.
Absolutely, Brianna. Oh my gosh, that is so important, isn't it? I didn't know what a dietitian was until I got to university and I met a friend there, and she was like, and I was focused on preventative care. And so I was thinking, like many of us, do I go down the doctor route, become a doctor? But I didn't want to be a doctor because I wanted to not treat the problem after it happened. I wanted to be involved in the preventative side of it. Very idealistic, maybe a bit naive, because not many people pay for preventative health, but we're working on it. We're changing that. But to your point, Brianna, I didn't even know about a dietitian until I was in college and you choosing your major and all of that sort of stuff, So if we can get the education earlier about our field, that, there's this wonderful thing called a registered dietitian who actually has a lot of knowledge about nutrition and research, not to be mistaken for people out there who call themselves nutritionists who've had one class or 40 hours. And in the state of New York, you can call yourself a nutritionist if you've had one class of 40 hours. And we've had, most of us, or those of us that have had gone through the master's piece, we've had 7 years, including our internship. We might know a thing or two about nutrition and research with that kind of education. Kimmie, any thoughts on that as well around accessibility?
Oh gosh, so many thoughts. Yeah, I think there were so many great points brought up today. And it's one thing I always ask myself in trying to make the dietetics profession more inclusive is how we can make the training more safe. And just, I know for me, I don't know if many of you all know this, but I've only been a dietitian for a couple of years. So it was pretty recently that I finished my training. And yeah, I think the worst part for me was how emotionally exhausting it was, knowing about HAES and fat positivity before joining that process. So I think making it a safer process is super important.
Oh, super important, Kimmie, super. And the emotion that I'm hearing from my students and students outside of my students at NYU is the students are getting angry. They're actually angry that they're hearing about intuitive eating and health at every size and size diversity through social media, right? Which again, Christy, you were saying 10 years ago when you went through your training, this wasn't a concept. And in the last 10 years, and particularly the last 5 years, social media has just become such a form of knowledge, both good and bad. But the spread of ideas is so amplified through social media, and it can be a really good thing in this case. And so our students are aware of these concepts, and then they're going through their trainings at many of our universities, and they're saying, why are we not being taught this? And why are we actually being taught the opposite? And there's actually anger and feeling duped and feeling, again, these are words from my students that they've shared with me, a feeling of I've spent, if they've gone through private universities, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I didn't learn these really important concepts like this is not okay. So again, all of that was a huge catalyst for bringing this event together today to put this out there and hopefully really add to this wave that has started and create a tidal wave where we can really come in and say, hey, we really need to have this important information in our studies and pay it forward. Go ahead, sorry, Christy.
I was going to say, I totally agree. I think that it puts the student in a really challenging position.
Is that Kendra?
Yes.
Oh, Kendra, sorry, just a little hard to hear you.
Oh. Can you hear
Go
me
ahead.
now?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I totally agree. I think it puts the student in a really challenging position. And that actually is a really great introduction to our last question. If Susie wants to ask it.
Yeah, so this next question is something that really resonates with me as I am hopefully going to be a dietetic intern next year, and a lot of other students that are here. So piggybacking off of all of this, how would you recommend that dietetic interns navigate situations where preceptors are asking them to do things that they might feel can cause harm? For example, fat phobic nutrition education, basing care strictly off the BMI, and other examples like that. Kimmie, would you like to follow up with this?
This is such a doozy. So, well, it really depends on the preceptor. I found that some are great, some are very open and respectful. I found that if you explain like, hey, look, I kind of, at its core, we're on the same page here. And so I might deliver this message without explaining the weight piece or explaining it in a little bit of a different way, and they're open to it. There might be some preceptors that are completely against it. I will never forget the moment in my clinical internship at the hospital where I was told to walk into a person's room who just had his leg amputated related to diabetes complications and to lecture him about his weight. I went in the first time and I didn't do it, and I just gave some general like nutrition ed around diabetes. I was sent right back in. Dietitians were outside of the room watching me, making sure I did it. And it was truly like, to this day, it haunts me. And so there might be moments like that. And it's up to you to decide like how much emotional energy you have in each moment. And you really will have this whole career you can dedicate to doing something different that is in line with your values. And so sometimes you have to jump through tough hoops to get there.
What an example, Kimmie. What an example. Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments there, Brianna, Dalina? Sorry, Brianna or Dalina, any other comments there?
I don't have a comment on, I think something that I was thinking about prior to this is I think we also need to discuss just a lot of the microaggressions that a lot of students have to deal with from preceptors. I think Kimmie gave a great example. I think that that's something that needs to be talked about in our profession as well. I think that I can name a few examples that I had to deal with, but I think that, again, as a dietetic profession, we have to start getting with the times and and kind of being open to see things differently. I think that another thing that I often saw with my preceptors, it was like, it's my way or the highway kind of thinking. And so I think that there's just a lot of work to be done. And so I don't even remember what the question Kimmie answered was anymore, because I was thinking about the microaggressions the whole time. But I think that that's where my heart is going, and that's where my brain is going, is that I need to that we need to address that. We need to address that within our dietetic profession. And I don't know if it starts off with the preceptors itself or maybe getting training, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done so that students feel comfortable in being able to speak up, like Kendra said, because we all have different way of practicing, and it's not always going to be the same, and there should be room for that.
Absolutely, Dalina. Thank you so much for that. Brianna, any last comments there as well? I know we're going to finish up in a moment, so wanted to make sure we heard from you as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I honestly did not know about intuitive eating or HAES while I was in my internship, so I just kind of went along with everything that was said to me. So I don't really have experience in this, and I know as an intern and as myself, like I am just someone who doesn't naturally like speak up and say no, like I'm not going to do this. So I think it's really going to come from, yes, maybe even working with the other interns and kind of doing it as a group and talking together if you're afraid of saying something. And then it comes with the education from the preceptors and education from the bottom going up as well.
Absolutely, Brianna. Christy, any last comments there as well?
I love what everyone already said, and I would just add to that that I always like the concept of planting seeds, because I think I forget who said it, but you can't always speak up in any given situation. Everybody sort of said that, right? That there's going to be times when you maybe have to just go with the flow, and you're doing it to get the letters after your name so that you can go on and do this work in a way that feels aligned with your values. And it may not always be aligned in your internship, right? But maybe there are opportunities to plant seeds. You can sort of suss people out and see how open they are. And if there's someone who's seems really in the diet culture, rooted in sort of diet culture's approach, but there's a little bit of an opening to maybe let you, like for me, for example, in my clinical rotation, my preceptor happened to hate eating disorders, and maybe some reasons for that, but she had me counsel all the clients with eating disorders, because she was like, well, you're interested in eating disorders, I have no interest in this, go ahead, right? And so with that, I was able to get some kind of free space to do more anti-diet type work with people, and not have her, she wasn't even in those sessions necessarily, right? So, and I was reporting back and discussing with her afterwards, and she'd be like, oh, interesting, why didn't you talk to this guy about his weight? And it's like, well, if he's binge eating and there's actually some restriction going on here, and I think the more important thing is to address the restriction and, address the binge eating, and his weight will do what it will, but that's not the focus right now. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, interesting. I wouldn't have known that because I don't specialize in eating disorders, and I'm not really interested in it. But, through that little seed, I think it, I have seen her over the years at various events and stuff, and kind of her interest seems to have grown in disordered eating and eating disorders. So it's like, okay, that's a seed that maybe I helped plant there. I'm sure there were other experiences she had too, but if there's some openness in any of your preceptors, I think you can sort of work with that.
I love how you're talking about, Christy, you can't win every battle, and also it's exhausting, and you're kind of really just looking for that opening as to if you think a preceptor might be a little bit open, and if they're not, like it's a little bit of it's a pretty exhausting process, and planting seeds. I love that idea. And again, for today, guys, our hope is, all the RD interns and RD students, nutrition students listening today, guys, you are the next generation of RDs. You will be the generation that makes all those things that you've heard today from these amazing panelists. So much knowledge here today. You guys will be the ones that will take that knowledge and hopefully shake things up and continue to improve, right? Our goal is to leave things a little better than when we first received them or moved into the field, to leave the field a little bit better. And you guys, I think, will really be making a lot of these changes. I'm super excited about that. With having said that, I think that was our last question. I'm going to now turn you back over to Rebecca. Rebecca, take it away.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and just kind of comment on how helpful all of these responses have been, but especially the ones about this particular topic of like, how do we deal with this when we're, in our internship and dealing with clients in the future. I'm going to start my internship next year, and I've been especially anxious about this. So it was just really awesome to get specific examples of kind of how we can deal with this in a realistic way. So thank you guys so much. And just overall, this was incredible. I kind of have no words. But before I close, does anyone have any last minute questions or closing statements? If not, I will hand it over to Danielle, but I'll leave, if anyone wants to say anything else, please feel free.
I think we're good. Shall we go to Danielle?
Okay.
Honestly, I think, Rebecca, we could talk for hours, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so like Rebecca said, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I just wanted to tell everyone about our next meeting. If you're interested in joining ADDS, our next meeting is actually this Wednesday, March 17th. It's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be having Dr. Sonneville come and speak with us about research on eating disorder prevention. Below is the link to our Instagram. You also can email us any questions you may have. We're going to post in this chat here too the link to join. And that's it. Thanks so much, everyone. Now I'm just going to pass this back over to Melainie. She has a few volunteer opportunities at Balance to share with all of you.
Danielle, thanks so much. And Rebecca, great webinar today. Yeah, and actually I'm seeing in the chat box, a lot of students are saying, how can I get some eating disorder exposure or experience? How can I get some intuitive eating and health at every size? I have the privilege actually of running my own eating disorder treatment center outpatient here in New York City. And we do have a lot of volunteer opportunities, and we have certainly internship opportunities as part of your RD internship as well. And right now we're 100% virtual. So if you're not in New York, it doesn't matter. So you can certainly check us out there. And also, guys, something that came up for me just as we finish up is there is a dearth of training and curriculum in one place around intuitive eating and health at every size and anti-diet, etc. I do teach one class at NYU, which I love, on eating disorders. We're working to get, a second class that has these concepts in it. But until then, and also for broader accessibility to you all and others, we're going to put together a curriculum at Balance that will be available on our website. So stay tuned for that, because you guys have really motivated me to maybe go that route until we can get more of this education into our universities throughout the country. So from that perspective, I will just say what an absolute delight today has been. We're finishing 100% on time. I'm so impressed, guys, with that as well. I actually learned so much today, and it really was an honor to spend this time with you all on this lovely Sunday. So without further ado, I will say thank you all and stay connected with us. And I'm really looking forward to this movement just gaining momentum. Danielle, any last words from you?
I think that's really it. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the panelists. This was incredible. We never get these experiences in the classroom or get to speak to dietitians about our actual, perspective on all of this with anti-diet. And as you guys know, the curriculum is very rooted in the BMI. So it's nice to be able to hear that there is this opportunity for us. And there's other people out there that we can connect to and turn to for these questions. So thank you so much. Everyone that's here, please come and join us so that we can have more of these discussions. We have great dietitians come to speak at every meeting, all with different backgrounds from all over the US. So it's incredible.